Welcome to the Foundations of Figma, our most in-depth Figma course for beginners. Today we will learn the basics of Developer Handoff inside Figma. I will not only teach best practices, but also show you practical examples that you can use to become ready for the industry. My name is Ansh Mehra and I teach students about design and AI. This is lecture 7 of our free 10 lecture series, where you can also win Figma's official pin and stickers. So without wasting any further time, let's get started. Alright, so let's get started. Before moving ahead, just want to make sure that this course is not to learn UX design. This course is to learn Figma. Figma is the tool that is being used by UX designers. UX design is the skill that you will get hired for. So this course is just to teach you the tool. After you learn Figma, you will still need to learn the subject of UX design, which is way more broader and way more complex. So this video is lecture 7 from our 10 lecture series. We have already uploaded all the videos before this on our YouTube channel. If you already know Figma and if you want to learn UX design in parallel starting today, you can use our 9-week syllabus, which is a complete roadmap to a UX design career. You can access this for free by going to learnuiux.in. Now the sad part is that a lot of you watched the first episode of this Figma course. This has like 147k views, but look how it dipped from episode 2, 3 and 4 onwards. I am 100% sure that a lot of you have not completed the entire Figma course. I would strongly recommend you that once you finish this video, please make sure that you complete all the videos that came before this, because if you don't watch the first 5-6 videos, then implementing the last 3-4 episodes is going to become very complicated. Now let's understand today's syllabus. On number 1, we'll understand what exactly is this design and developer handoff. A lot of people use this term interchangeably, but the core concepts are pretty much the same. So we'll understand why do you need developer handoff? What are the most important things you need to know? In module 2, I'll teach you what is the Figma's developer mode. So they have recently introduced this. So on the top right corner, if you look at this icon right here, if I click on this, you'd realize that the entire design panel changes. So you have a completely new set of options on the right. You have a completely different set of things on the left side. So this is how you can switch from design mode to developer mode. And we'll understand what is the use and the important features of developer mode. Then in third module, I'll give you some practical examples so that you can actually implement this knowledge. Now throughout the video, you will be able to see all the keys I press here, and you'll also see my cursor. This is just to make sure that all the content is easily accessible. Let's start with module number 1. What exactly is this developer or design handoff? See, I'll tell you how apps are built in the real world. Step number 1 is that a product manager from your company or someone from your company would come to you with a PRD, which is a project requirement document. That PRD has a list of features, a list of edge cases, every single thing is specified. Now in a lot of startups, they don't have PMs, they don't use PRDs. If they don't, I'm pretty sure that you would be having some conversations where you list out the features that you want. Now it is both the PM's and the designer's job to make sure that they list out all the edge cases and all the important user flows in this PRD document itself. Once the designer gets the PRD, they have a couple of design rounds where the designer is working on multiple iterations, and then the iterations are shown to the PM. Once the PM has approved that these designs are in sync with what the product team actually wanted, then the designs are ready for the handoff. So once you have finished all the feedback rounds between the designer and the product manager, now it is time to include the developer as well. Now, in a lot of companies where design and development work closely together, the developer is introduced in the first call itself, where they are discussing the PRDs. So when the product manager tells the designer that these are the features I want from you, the developer also tells whether this is possible or not, along with timelines as to how much time would it take to build this feature. So let's just say that a product manager comes with a very complicated feature, and the designer says that for me, it is easy to design this in 5 days. But the developer says that it is not easy for me to develop this within the timelines. So then the developer pitches in and tells the PM and tells the designer that this is how you should make this to make it feasible for me. So once the designer has completed all of this internal feedback with the PM, finally the design files are ready to be shown to the developer. Now this is where the developer handoff process comes in. Developer handoff is nothing but your responsibility as a designer to clean up your design files and to give a file to the developer. Because when you're designing, you would have so many things, right? You are exploring, you're deleting, you have iterations, you have tons of things that you're working on. But for the developer, what matters is the final UI. Apart from the final UI, the developer also needs to know what are the different flows that she needs to develop. She also needs each and every component, each and every style, every single thing needs to be properly organized because the developer has not been designing with you, right? So you need to literally document all of your designs very, very neatly on a Figma file so that when the developer opens your Figma file, she is able to understand this is what I need to develop. Now, when we talk about developer handoff, 2-3 years ago, when features were not available in Figma, people used to use plugins like red lines and they used to like make all of these specific pixel variations that this is 20 pixels, this is 24 pixels. They would create annotations to specify the font. So there were a lot of handoff tools and plugins available to make all of these things explicit. Now you don't have to do any of those things. And to be honest, it is very, very amazing to talk about all of these handoff plugins and stuff. But when the real work comes in, when you're actually developing, you don't have that much time to go into that much of detail. So the only way to scale this is to have proper systems in place where the developer already knows a lot of things by default. So if I had to summarize, and this is by the way a super oversimplified version of how this works. Step number 1, you finish all the feedback rounds with the PM. And then you have a canvas with a lot of UIs because you are exploring and you have things that you want to delete, you have explorations. So now out of that really, really big canvas, out of those lots of screens that you have designed, you need to shortlist. You need to cherry pick the absolute final screens that the developer needs to know. Now, once you have cherry picked these files, you can either create a new page inside your current Figma file, or you can have a new Figma file that is just for developers. So basically, there is one Figma file where all the designers are brainstorming, the PM is brainstorming, there's a lot of clutter. But when the developer needs to see something, you either create a fresh, clean page with only the UI that matters, or you create a new Figma file. Then the developer will develop that file. He or she will try to sort of code everything, and then she will come back to you that you had designed this is what I've developed. Now in big companies, usually the developers are really, really experienced. So they will design and they will sort of create the entire UI in code exactly as how you have designed on Figma. But in a lot of startups where the timelines are very, shifty and very panicky, developers often drift away from the real designs. So you would design something and when you see the final outcome, it would be something else. And for a lot of developers, it is not very easy to find out these differences. So you remember that game we used to play in our childhood where they used to show us picture A and picture B and ask us to find the differences? That is literally what you need to do as a designer. You need to keep your Figma files on the left and the developer's outcome on the right and figure out what are the differences and then tell the developer that this is not what I had designed. So this entire process is called either pixel perfection or just doing a design QA. So when the developers develop and come back for the review, in step number 6, the designers confirm that all the pixels and all the coded components are identical to how they were designed. And then once the designer confirms to the developer sends the product to QA. Now QA stands for quality assurance, or QC is also there in a lot of companies where they say quality checks. Now in small startups, the developer and the PM only do the QA. But in bigger companies where the software is really, really complicated, the PM and the developer don't have that much of time to do QA in all cases. So QA is not just about how it visually looks. QA is also about that, is this input field able to tackle all the edge cases? Is this working on different devices? Is this working with low internet? Is this working when the brightness is low or when a screen is cracked? Like there are many, many ways that you can run a QA. But I just wanted to summarize this entire process because throughout the course, we never really took a holistic approach of how products are really, really designed. So the question is, why do we need handoff? Of course, developers need all the use cases, all the edge cases in one single place. Second, when they look at a UI, for example, this is a screenshot from our Figma files from a platform that we had designed called howtoprompt.in. And I will be showing you the Figma files that we had made to actually launch that website, because I want to make sure that the entire lecture is very, very practical. So you can obviously go to the website and I'll show you the Figma files, which is the behind the scenes. So for the developer, she needs to know what color is this. So this is my header component, but she needs to know what style is this, what style is this, or what types is this, right? Because there are so many things that you need to have in the system, and they cannot be confused with your iterations. They can't see that big pool of UI. Also folks, before moving ahead, I am very, very serious that we will not release the next video before we get 500 comments. We were running the same thing in the previous video and some of you smart folks just copied, pasted your comments. When I say 500 comments, I just want support from you folks to take this series ahead. So I want 500 distinct and genuine comments and 1000 likes within 5 days of upload. Now on top of this free course, I have a surprise for you. We are giving away the official Figma pin and the official Figma stickers to one lucky winner. So one person is going to get the Figma pin and the sticker, and the person who comes second will get the Figma stickers only. Now how do you win these goodies? Let me tell you. First of all, you need to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You need to comment your top learnings and give us feedback in the comment section. You need to document all of your learnings throughout this episode and post them on LinkedIn and tag me and Figma. And then once you've done this, you need to email screenshots of proof of all of these 4 steps to aditi@anshmehra.com. This competition is valid only till 7 days from the video upload date, and it is valid only for 2 viewers living in India. So the first prize, the first winner will get the Figma pin and the stickers, and the runners up position will get just the stickers. Coming back to the lecture, this entire skill of creating developer handoff varies with context. So when we talk about UX, even in UX, you have multiple products. In multiple products, you have digital products. Within digital products, you have either usable products or simple landing pages. When I say usable products, it could be an app like Swiggy or Cred. But when we talk about a landing page, then it could be a marketing website. For example, anshmehra.com, that is a landing page for me. It's not really a product. So the entire expectation, the entire checklist changes between products and websites. Even in products and websites, the process changes for startups versus companies versus freelancing clients, because products in general would have a lot of edge cases, whereas websites will not. Websites are just like, they have some input fields, they have some forms, but in general, they don't have a lot of edge cases, not a lot of branching. So in the beginning, because this is a very, very basics course, this is not a UX design course, this is just a Figma course, we will only focus on the best practices, and we will understand what all are the important Figma features that you need to know to implement those basics. Now, before I move ahead, I just want to make sure that we all are on the same page, understanding the differences between a mobile app, a web app, and a website. So let's take the example of Notion. This screenshot right here is from the native app of Notion. When I say native app, this is the original Notion app that you download from the Apple App Store. You need to download this. You need to make sure that to access this, you need to open the app. The second screenshot is me accessing my Notion account from Google Chrome, from a web browser. So I did not download any app from the App Store. I went to Google Chrome or I went to Safari. I basically went to a web browser. I opened Notion's website and I logged in and I accessed the same account that I was earlier accessing from the native app. This thing right here is the mobile app. This thing right here is the web app. However, if I open the same URL in an incognito tab, or if my friend opens Notion's website from the first time, he or she will not access this web app because that person hasn't logged in. They will see the landing page, which is also accessed from the web browser, but this is not a product. This is a product, but it is running on a web app browser. This is not a product. This is just a landing page. So I just want to make sure that this example is really, really clearly defined. Now you would be wondering what is more different about all of these 3 things. The most important difference is the fact that the platform specific requirements change. In a native app, let's take the example of YouTube. In the YouTube's native app that you download from the App Store, because you have downloaded a lot of data, it is pre-fed, it is always taking space in your phone, you can do a lot more things. And the possibilities are usually restricted by what you can do in Swift, which is a language used to develop Apple apps, and Objective-C. So you can put in a lot of animations, a lot of Lottie files. You can do a lot simply because you have the option of compressing all of that data into that native app. That is why native apps are for like 100 MB, 150 MB. All of that data is stored in the app, so it instantly loads when you tap on the app. On the other hand, if I were to access YouTube from the web browser, that is, if I go to Google Chrome and type youtube.com, then I will go to m.youtube.com, which is basically the web app version of YouTube for mobile. Here, everything runs on JavaScript, HTML and CSS. Visually, you would feel that, oh, like this is pretty straightforward. This is so similar to how it is on the native app. But on the back end, the frameworks are very, very different. Same with the landing page. If I open YouTube on an incognito window where there is no account signed in, then you'd realize that it would recommend me some content that is very popular in our country. And overall, it looks pretty much the same. But a big difference is that both of these run on JavaScript, HTML and CSS, whereas this runs on Swift and Objective-C, which is basically the official language that you need. And of course, the possibilities of these two are very, very different. You can do a lot more in Swift and Objective-C. And of course, there are some things that you can only do in JavaScript and HTML, but you'll understand in the next slide why this is so important. So to functionally understand why this matters to us, if I take the example of LinkedIn, you'd realize that in my LinkedIn's native app, I can host a lot of heavy media and a lot of complex animations. I can add more features. But if I access my LinkedIn profile from the web browser, which is the web app, you'd realize that they have cut off a lot of different features and you can't have a lot of heavy animations, because when somebody accesses your website from mobile data, that user is expecting very lightweight animations, very lightweight content. And it is recommended even for your SEO to have faster loading times. The same principle would be carried forward if I were to design the landing page for LinkedIn as well. Now, why am I explaining this? Because the developer handoff for all of these three will be different. As a product designer, if your company is planning to release the iOS app and the web app and a landing page, then all of them will have separate projects. A lot of designers just combine everything. This segregation has to be done very, very quickly at the foundation levels. Otherwise, when you scale in the longer run, things will become very, very complicated for you. The next question is, how does it change for startups versus companies versus your own personal freelancing clients? The thing is, companies have a lot of pre-established processes and a lot of pre-established systems and a lot of QA in place. For example, on the right side, I've taken some components from the material design library. By the way, if you've seen our previous episodes, you would remember that these are the buttons from the latest Material 3 guidelines. If you were working in a company like Google, or if you were working in a company that has a very Android-based app, you'd realize that they would already have these systems in place. So for a designer, it becomes very easy to design things quickly, and that person doesn't need to attach all the styles and typography again and again. And big companies are very, very careful about these styles and components. Like, you cannot make a mistake there because the QA team will find out and then you'll just run in circles. So these designers actually train themselves on learning the design systems very, very well. But when it comes to startups and, even freelancing, like, things are way more lenient. So in startups, the priority is to just release the feature. They will barely give you any time for creating systems. What you need to make sure is that you fix your fundamentals, and I'll tell you what those fundamentals are. But basically, before you start designing anything for your startup, you need to close down your UI, your typography, your icon packs, and your basics of shadows and basic of input fields. These are the most important ones. In freelancing, it becomes even more lenient because in freelancing, you're mostly working with just one person. Or in case of web development, you are the one who's developing. If it is a one-man team, then you don't even have to do that much of organization. For example, if I were to show you my how to prompt handoff, you would just freak out that here Ansh is giving so much of gyan, but then on that end, his actual files for how to prompt are really, really untidy. But when I was working as a professional designer, when I had more stakeholders in the game, when I knew that this is going to be seen by 5-6 different people, there I had to keep things more organized. In my own website's case, I can get away with a lot of, unorganized data because it's just me and one more person. So we are all on the same page. But you don't have to put yourself into that zone where everything needs to be perfect if you're working in a startup, because it will not work out, and that is the truth. In big companies, it still does. So with a lot of theory behind us, let's just understand what are the basics of developer handoff, what are some very important best practices that you need to learn. Now, this video has very limited knowledge. I'm not going to go too deep, but Figma has a very interesting document called Guide to Developer Handoff, a collection of best practices from the experts. I would strongly recommend you to read this document. I will paste the link in description. We will mostly cover 4 important best practices. Number 1 is your habit of splitting your entire work system into projects, specific files, and then within the files having specific page structures. Then we'll understand what is the difference between declaring a core design system versus design systems for specific features. How do you organize a specific feature and a really big feature? Like, how do you even structure when your company has iOS, Android, web, then within that you have iterations, go to market. So how do you figure this out? Then in the end, I'll show you how do you structure a specific Figma page? How do you break down the flow? How do you list out the edge cases, and some important things as to how do you put a comment card and how do you do the design review. Now, to make this video practical, I will have to take a real app, otherwise nothing will make sense to you. So just for this video, we are taking Spotify's example because I have used Spotify really well, and I know that Spotify has an Android version, an iOS version, and a web app version, but everything that I teach here is going to be an oversimplification. In fact, we're only relying on screenshots that I've got from Mobin. And I have to tell you that in reality, Spotify's design system would be way more complicated. But the things that I show you today, you can at least use this thing in your own freelance projects, in your own startup. So for a startup and a freelancing agency, this kind of structure will work really well. But don't believe that this is how Spotify would have, created their components and structures. This is my fictionalization of how it could have been done in a very oversimplified way. So most importantly, before you design anything, you need to lay down the foundations of how your Figma file structure will look like. And to have multiple projects, multiple files, you will need to get the pro plan of Figma. This is not possible on the free plan. Now, I would recommend you, this is how your project panel on the left side would look, right? When you open Figma, on the left side, you have these projects. I would recommend you to have one specific project just for design systems. In that design systems, what you need to do, I'll explain that in a minute, but have one project dedicated for design systems. This is where you declare your palettes, your typography, your colors, because these are universal, right? When it comes to your brand colors are going to be used in the iOS app, in the Android app, in the web app. But when it comes to typography, iOS typography will be different, Android typography will be different, and then web typography will be different. So I will show you in a minute how you split these up, but yeah, one project just for your design systems. Then iOS, Android, and web can have their own different projects. Otherwise, it will get very chaotic for you. What I have usually done in all of my work is that my WIP and GTM are different. So WIP stands for work in progress and GTM stands for go to market. So you remember in the beginning of the video, I told you that as a designer, you will have one file where you are exploring and you're documenting and you're keeping all of the iterations. That file, that discovery file, that file has all of your explorations, will be called as your work in progress file, WIP. But once I am done with my WIP, I will declare all the components from my WIP and then create a library. Once I've published a library, I will go to my GTM file. In my GTM file, I will enable that library from WIP because I will not redeclare stuff in GTM. GTM will only have the final UI, that too taken from the WIP. Now, if you are getting confused, I am 100% sure that you haven't seen the styles and libraries video, and I would still recommend you to finish all those videos before you come to this one. So if you feel that this is getting very confusing for me, what are libraries, what are styles, you'd have to watch the previous episodes in the playlist. Coming back, you need to make sure that you're not redeclaring or copying pasting components from WIP to GTM. If you copy paste components from WIP GTM, you'll have two components that essentially do the same thing. You'll have multiple declarations of the same thing. The right way is to explore everything in WIP, create a page with the final UI in WIP, publish a library, take instances, go to your GTM, enable the WIP library, and then paste the instances. You'd have to watch this video 2 times to get this understanding, and I will show you in practical examples as well. And stay with me. Don't panic. Don't close this video. Stay with me. Everything will become cleared out. This is one of those videos where the level will go slightly high. And I know it. And you'd have to spend time. You'd have to watch it 2-3 times to sort of get this into your brain. Okay. Now, as I said, I have web WIP, iOS WIP, Android WIP. If you want, you can also keep them, WIP and GTM, iOS WIP, GTM, and all of these will have individual files. Now, when it comes to colors can go into design systems, but typography, iconography, and images will change from one platform to another. So each and every platform will have its own separate design systems. And each category has GTM and WIP, and then each project will have individual files. Now, files are for specific features. Now, let me show you by an example. For example, if I go to the design systems project, my design systems project will essentially have at least these 4 files. First, I have my universal guidelines where I have my brand colors, my icons, my copy directions, my shadows, my border radii, all of these things. Basically, anything that is universal is going to come here. But then there are some things very specific to the iOS system, very specific to the desktop web app, very specific to the Android. In that case, those components are going to be declared locally. I don't want to pollute my universal guidelines file with iOS components, desktop components, Android components. Because when I'm creating an Android feature, I will only enable universal guidelines and the Android file guidelines. These are the 2 libraries that I will enable. I will not even enable desktop and iOS system because that will just slow my file down, right? So you will have, you will have one universal file that has all of your colors. And then device specific files will have platform specific inputs. And then you need to make sure that your libraries are enabled accordingly, which means that for a file like universal guidelines, this library has to be enabled in every feature. But if I'm working on a web app, then I will also enable desktop one. And please make sure that you maintain covers for all of them. Even the file name matters a lot. Also, not sure if you know this, if you create a frame, and I will give you the frame in this Figma file as well. And by the way, all of these slides are going to be released on the Figma community. You can select any frame and select this option of set as thumbnail. But there's a specific way on how do you need to design this cover. So let me show you how this would work. Okay, 1500 pixels by 960 is a safe area for the thumbnail. And then you need to make sure that you prioritize simplicity and legibility. So please don't make covers that are really, really fancy. For example, for my design systems, I've kept a white background. For my GTMs, I have completely changed the background color. This is a very, very good hack because then instantly when your developer or other designers look at your file, they instantly know that this is a GTM file. However, just color doesn't make sense. So I always put a tag that says GTM followed by the platform, followed by the feature name, followed by the designer who's working and their pictures. So if you have 2 designers, then you can sort of overlap, and then a screenshot of the UI, just to have more visual relief. Otherwise it'll become very, very text heavy. Similarly for WIP, everything remains the same, but the background color has changed and the tag now says WIP. So just to revise how to make a good cover, you need to prioritize simplicity and legibility. See, it is super, super clean. Have a template that scales well. You'd realize that this would scale for desktop, Android, iOS, any feature, any screen. This will work pretty well. Have tags for statuses. For example, here it's for GTM, here it's for WIP. You can experiment with background fills when you go from GTM versus WIP. Avoid having too many variations. So don't, have a different color for iOS, different color for Android, different color for web. Your brain will get confused. So you have to, sort of keep these things very, very easy. And it's always best to have designers face, especially in startups and big companies where you have more than 3 or 4 designers, because then you can instantly look at a cover file and you would instantly know who to message on Slack. Okay. Now, if I were to show you a quick example of how I had organized my how to prompt file, this is how it looked. Okay. And I'll tell you how we made that website. We basically took a Webflow template. And I took a screenshot of that entire template. I used this plugin called HTML to Figma that created the Figma files. And then I have these header components. Okay. In my header components, I would say that, this is the main landing page. And then I would tell my team that this header should now become this. this thing should become like this. So I individually started, designing all of these things, and I had like put like a basic wireframe. And then for individual assets, I've sort of told them that these are the files that you need to make, right? So if I were to go here and click on this comment, these are your main components. Okay. Now in your main components, I have also given them the individual titles and pictures. So this is the responsibility of the designer. You don't only need to give them the component, but you need to give them the media as well. So in a lot of cases, PMs do this as well. So PMs would come in, they would give the media, they would give the text, but in a lot of startups, it is the designer's responsibility to make sure that they keep all of these instances. And notice how I have kept all of them very, very well organized, in one single place, because I'll tell you how our design worked. So basically on this website, we had videos, directories, AI tools, prompts, and this component was getting reused. So once I declared this, I've created these headers for ChatGPT, for Midjourney, for directories, and then my developer sort of, put these things together. Now, obviously you would be saying that you are totally not following all the things that you had taught us. Yes, because we were in a very, very big hurry. And eventually I will clean this up. But the most important fundamental here is that this is still not extremely unorganized, right? So even if you do just the basics of headers, just the basics of your component declarations, and if you have all of your copy here, it would work pretty well. And just to let you know that even in handoff, sometimes you don't have to make the entire design for each and every possible component. You can just tell your developer that, dude, this is one component and this is all the copy that you need to put here. Like for example, we had a testimonial card that looks like this. So in our development, we only gave this card. And then I made all the content paste here. Like this is all the content that they have to put. So did I make this component again and again for every single testimonial? No, it doesn't really matter. If your design is scalable and you know that it will not break, you can simply put it here. I knew that this is pretty scalable. I have made this component. Then on the right side, I've put all of my content. So even the content can go here. In a lot of companies, they create a Coda doc or a Notion doc where they put all of this content together. Sometimes the PRD also has all of this content together. We made this website with a very a rough timeline. We had to finish this website in 5 days, 5 days in design and then another 5-6 days in website. So yeah, I think that is a very, very interesting way to, quickly finish things. But then let me show you a company-based example. So here we are in the Spotify iOS GTM project. And then within the iOS GTM project, we have iOS/new user/GTM. So this is a naming convention that you can also follow, that you put the platform / the feature. In the feature, avoid spaces. I always go with underscores or, dashes, and then /GTM again, because sometimes when you're searching in Figma, they will just search for iOS or they will just search for GTM. So it's always good to have these things in the name. Now notice the first page of my Figma file is the onboarding file. So basically these are the designs that we need to make for any new user who comes to Spotify. Notice that the cover file is at the very end. People always keep the cover file on the very top. So as soon as somebody clicks on the Figma file, they reach to the cover, which is useless. You can make this file your thumbnail and then drag the cover page at the bottom. It would still do the same thing. So it's just a quick time-saving hack for developers and designers. They directly jump into what is required. I also have a page called archive just to show you that you can always have this page. Okay, now of course I will break down all of these things one by one, but just to give you a quick overview that I have created this header. Okay, the header also has multiple colors. So this header is for an overarching view, that this is the onboarding screen. Within the onboarding screen, we have new account creation. Then we have another account creation. Then we have personalizing the experience. Then we have the premium subscription option. And then for every screen, by the way, these are screenshots, but in your real projects, these would be editable frames. You have your final frames here. So vertically, you are going through different flows. Horizontally, you are going within the flow. So left to right, I'm navigating inside the flow. This is how the app would work. And then vertically, I have all the different features within onboarding. Now, next to your Figma frames, you need to keep your localized components in place. So for example, if this component right here, this genre card is something that is only used here for the very, very first time, this is not a universal component. Okay, so this is an assumption that I'm making, that let's assume that this component is just for this new user file. This is something that I can declare here. But if we talk about the colors or the search bar or maybe, any of these icons or maybe this done button right here, they will not be declared in new user. These universal components will be declared in that design systems file. In the design systems project, you have the iOS file. In the iOS file, you'll have all of these common core components because they are getting reused everywhere. They are not exclusive to new user. But for all of these local components, I have kept this thing right here. Another very important habit is that you can have these annotation cards. You can just, create them or just duplicate these. And I've created a fictional designer, Anjali Singh, and you can have them in different colors as well. So a white comment can stand for a generic thing, generic mentions, but a yellow or a green one can be for something which requires a lot of attention or something very, very specific. Now you would be wondering that, Ansh, why do we need this comment cards when we have Figma comments? I have personally benefited a lot from these because, when my developer would come on the file, she would be able to quickly see where are the white comments, where are the yellow comments, and she would quickly zoom in and check these out. Right? And then we would always have these cards in front of us. So we're also able to track our feedback because in Figma comments, they get resolved, they get hidden. You don't see them visually like the colors and all. I just personally feel that the comment cards are way, way more cool and they're always there. They're always, stuck on the UI. It is just something that I've really, really enjoyed and benefited from. Right? Now, please make sure that whatever you're making, these are well organized, and later in the video I'll tell you what is this new section feature. This will come in the dev mode, but I just thought I'll quickly show you this example. Now this is how you can create a header file for your Figma files. So this is a project that you can just duplicate. Figma community will have this file and you can change the background. The font that I've chosen, it's called Satoshi, so you can download this for free and you can put your phone right here. This is an iPhone mockup. You can put any mockup that you want, and in Figma it usually crops out the left and right, so please be mindful of that it's not necessary that whatever you put on your Figma header will be visible on the outside. You need to be very, very careful about that as well. Now there are some quick tips that I want to share before we get to module number 2. Number 1, please create header components that are simple. For example, in my case, my header components are very, very simple. You have one subtext, you have one heading. Sometimes I had a version where I would have a 2 sentences subtext within the heading as well, sometimes if I want to explain something. But keep these headers very, very simple and don't have more than 2 to 3 colors because every color will just confuse you. If you're working with PRDs or documentations, then what you can do is you can take this text and link the PRD of that specific feature. So what happens is that when the developer comes to your file, if she feels confused about the UI and she's like, what exactly do you mean here? She can also go through the PRD. So this can be a hyperlink to the PRD as well. Vertical flow is for going through the different use cases, and then of course horizontally you go within the flow. This we've already discussed. Dashes and underscores instead of spaces, whether it's your file, whether it's your layer names, whether it's your component names. Please make sure that you use dashes and underscores. Do not use slash because slash will just complicate a lot of things in the longer run. I will not get into the details of why you should not use slash. That is something that we can cover in an advanced course. But just have this as a syntax, as a rule of thumb, that use dashes and underscores instead of spaces or slashes. Then please practice naming your layers whenever you're designing. Please make sure that you have your things sorted. For example, here, if you check out this naming is absolutely incorrect because I was in a hurry. Technically, this should be called tab 1. This thing should be called tab 2. And if they are a component, then they should be called tab text or text label. So don't make the copy of the UI the name of the layer. The layer name is a placeholder. So it should be called input text and not full name, right? Because full name is the copy that you use in the UI, but it is the input text that is supposed to be the right name for that layer. Also, when you're giving your handoff, the best absolute litmus test is to make sure that on the left side, do you have instances or do you have detached layers? Ideally, when you're doing your handoff, 80 to 90% of your layers inside the mobile frames should be instances. Nothing should have detached stuff. Even on the right side, you see all of these detached colors in my selection colors. This should not be there. Everything should be a style. If there's anything that is not a style, it will become problematic. So you need to audit your own GTM files before you give them to the developer. Make sure that there are only instances and there are no colors without styles. I think in typography, you can still get away with it, but with colors, you cannot. So this is super, super important. Now the quick tips have not ended because apparently there's a lot to it. Next, we have part 2 of the quick tips. By the way, if you still haven't clicked on subscribe and not clicked on the bell icon, please do that, because folks, I'm telling you, I have recorded more than an hour of content right now. So you would believe that Ansh would just record this in an instant and it takes, very little time. But the truth is that we spend a lot of time making these decks. You have seen the amount of effort I've made into this video. Without your support, it becomes very, very difficult for us to do this on a sustainable level. So please make sure you comment and you like this video, you click on subscribe and you hit the bell icon, because every single comment, every single bell icon hit goes a very, very long way. Coming back to the video, when you're doing your design reviews, you remember I told you that your developer will come back to you with the web app or with the iOS app and actually show you that, Ansh, this is what I've developed. Then as a designer, you need to do a proper review. Now in iOS and Android, you'd have to take screenshots and put your Figma files and the screenshots on left and right. But when you're doing it on web, you can always use inspect element. Now let me show you how that works. Inspect element is something which is super, super important for folks who are, reviewing web apps. So if you go to Google Chrome, if you right click and click on inspect, there's a panel that opens up on the right side. Now don't get intimidated by this. I will exactly tell you what is happening here. Okay. You don't have to freak out just because there's a lot of code. Okay, so let me zoom in. See, in HTML and CSS, this language is called HTML and CSS. When I selected this text and clicked on inspect, by default, Google Chrome will open this window and tell me where exactly is this declared in code. So you can see this blue outline. It automatically knows that this is the code that I've used for destination. Now, if I hover, you'd realize that on the left side, Google Chrome tells me this thing called div.textGradient purple to text medium. So these are classes. What are classes? We don't need to understand this right now. The important point here is that on the right side, you can see the exact text and the exact styles that they have used, your developer has used. For example, if I double click on this one-stop destination, I can literally make this hello Ansh, press enter, and this text would change. This is happening on code. Now on the right side, you have this thing called styles. In styles, you have element.style. This is basically a class. Then within that class, you have some, gibberish code. Let's just call this gibberish code because most designers don't need to understand how this works. The important thing is this. You see this entire list that has these checkboxes. These are all the different CSS properties. Okay, CSS properties define how your content looks visually. HTML is where they declare the structure and the content, but it is CSS. CSS actually stands for style sheets. Okay, so I think it's called cascaded style sheets. Why is it called cascaded? We don't need to worry about it. The point here is that it is this thing that actually helps us make our content look good. So let's say on your Figma files, you had made this font size as 32 and the developer comes back to you and gives you this page and you're like, this doesn't look good. You can right click, inspect, select hello Ansh, go to font size and then double click and make this 38 as well. So you'd be like, this is supposed to be 38, but you've made it like 28 or whatever it is. And you can make all of these changes right here and check out how this would look. Right now, of course, you can really go into the details of all of this content, but in most cases, it is very, very easy to just edit this part. Sometimes I would go and also check out these properties as well, where it would inherit specific colors, but then it would become very, very complicated for you. But this is very, very helpful because sometimes, let's just say I'm doing an inspect and I want to check how this content would look. You would realize that there's some gibberish content and there are these small 3 dots. If you double click on that, you'd realize that this is the content that you can edit. So you can literally say, hi, join me, and then you can quickly see how it would look. Now you'd realize that hi, join me is in a separate color and learning AI tools in a separate color. That is because there is one title and then there is a gradient title. So there is a different set of title here. So I can put a space and then, it'll start to work. So I just thought I'll mention this quickly because understanding the basics of inspect element is very, very important. I would strongly recommend you to try inspect element on your web apps. It is a very, very important practice when you have done your design handoff for a web product or for a website or for any landing page whatsoever. When it comes back to you, inspect really helps you to do those changes. Okay. Now assume that you are having a call with your developer and you are telling your developer to open the inspect panel. You are on a Google Meet call. and that guy is making changes on the inspect panel. There's one very, very big mistake that people make, and I want to specifically call this out. This is a very, very small thing, very nuanced thing, but very, very practical. A lot of juniors miss this. Number one, once you have made all the inspect element changes, once you've told the developer that this is how it needs to be, because you're working on inspect, you're not working on Figma, ask the developer to take a screenshot. Because as soon as you refresh, all the changes that you make in inspect element go away. So these changes that I was making, they were not actually being done to the actual code. My website is not changing. It is just that locally on my computer, things are changing. But as soon as I do Command R, let's just say I go here, and if I press Command R, you'd realize that the text is back to normal. Before you hit refresh, you need to make sure that you take a screenshot. Ask your developer to take a screenshot as well. Second, because you're having a conversation, please ask your developer to note down every single change in either a notebook or in a Slack channel, whatever it is, because you not only need the screenshot, you also need the explicit list of changes that the developer has to make after the design review. Another thing, you need to teach your developers about the developer mode. So by the way, if your developer comes to this file and hold the Option key and drag anywhere else, they'll quickly see, all of these options, right? You're like 35 pixels long. So all of these small things you need to tell your developers. You also need to recommend your developers to learn about developer mode, which comes if you click on this icon right here. So if they learn the basics of developer mode from Figma's documentation, I'm telling you, your life will become 10 times easier. Another very important lesson that I learned is that when you are doing a handoff with your developers, please make a prototype, especially when you have a lot of flows and edge cases, because developers are very functional thinkers. They might not be able to think about a lot of edge cases just by looking at static screens, because they're also humans, right? You as a designer have everything mapped up in your brain, but there are a lot of things that you discover only when you prototype. Prototypes are insanely valuable. In fact, the next lecture in our series is about the basics of prototype. To be honest, I can make a full 10-hour long course on prototyping alone, but the next video will just cover the basics so that you have enough tools to sort of, get ahead. But please, if you get some time, always make a prototype when you're showing your websites or apps to the developer. And of course, use comment cards, give edit access to your developer, let him or her understand how do you comment. So basically, developers need to know the basics of moving files and copying files and editing text, and they will get it. It's very easy as well. Another very important practice that a lot of web products use is called throttling. So I will not really explain you how do you do throttling, but throttling is basically checking how your website will load if the internet levels are really low. So not everyone has high internet connection. If you're making a website for a person who's selling webinar courses, then you need to check how that webinar course landing page will load on an Android phone with really low internet. Because if they are running ads, they're spending money for people to reach on that mobile landing page. And if your mobile landing page does not load in 1 to 2 seconds on a low internet connection, then all of that money, all of that effort is essentially wasted. So this is something that you can Google after this video ends as to how do you do throttling inside Google Chrome. It is very easy. It is a free feature. With that, we come to module number 2 as to what exactly is this developer mode. Before we get into the details of developer mode, I want to introduce a new feature inside Figma, which is called sections. So if you go to this frame icon right here, if you click on the chevron, you'd realize that you have this new thing called section. So you remember I told you that when you are done with your GTM files, when you're done with your final frames, you create a new page or a new file so that your developer is not getting confused. So your developer knows this is something which is the exploration, this is the final file. Turns out that you can now select specific frames in your cluttered file and mark them ready for development. And you can achieve this using sections. So for example, in my account creation file, if my developer comes here and sees this section, I can literally go here, click on this coded icon and say ready for dev. So I have marked it ready for dev. If I click on remove ready status, it will go away. So the interesting thing here is that if I mark this ready for dev, the developer, as soon as she comes on the Figma file, she will know that this specific page has frames or has sections that are ready for development. And if she enters developer mode, she will quickly understand what are the sections that are ready for development. So they are all called out right here. So, of course, you can always, rename these. And of course, as a designer, instead of keeping it as section 1, you can literally call this browse music. So that way, when the developer enters the dev mode, she will know that within ready for development, you have browse for music ready. So this solves the problem of having, WIP and GTM as separate files. I would still recommend this for bigger companies, but if you're in a smaller company, then you don't have to maintain so many files. If you feel that in the next 5 to 6 months, you will not have these many files and these many features. It's a basic website. You can simply have a single page file, and this is really, really helpful for people who don't want to complicate things. So you can just create a section and just mark it as ready for dev, and that section itself becomes your GTM section. Now, as I said, I think this is a small mistake that I had created. Let me just delete this. Alright, so let's understand the basics of developer mode, because I showed you, right? So as soon as I entered the developer mode, things really change on the right side. So what exactly happens when you go from design to dev? On the right side, you have two panels. You have inspect and you have plugins. Plugins we will not cover today. Let's understand inspect. And for this, let us take a screen that looks like this. Okay, so this is a fictional screen that I've made. And on the very top, you have the name. You have the changes made. You have a timestamp of last changes made. You have this thing called as dev resources, where you can either put a link to your code or to your VS code or any workspace. It could be any resources that a developer might need. And then here, if I click on any specific component, let's just say I go to this frame right here. In just a second, I can see the padding, the dimensions, the layout, the colors used, and all the assets used inside, and then I can export them as well. Now, this is very, very useful, because if I select any instance, let's just say that this is one specific instance, I can go to the actual component. They also have a component playground where you can switch between different states if this was a component with different variations. So if you create a variant, then you open up a playground where you can switch through different variants. And of course, all of your colors, all of your assets are in the same place. Now, this is very, very useful, because once you select the entire UI, you can not only see the colors, but you can see all the assets that you will need, and you can export all of them from different, resolutions from one single place. So you can either do a layer export, or you can do the source image file, which is actually the high resolution file. So if I do the layer export, it will export exactly this size. But if I want to have it like a high resolution thing, then I can always get the source file. Figma also has a VS Code integration. We'll not get into it because I have personally never used VS Code. But yes, there are a lot of crazy features specifically for developers. When we launch a course on UX for developers, we'll probably get into the depths of how this works. But the crazy part here is that if you change the component, let's say you have a component and you've made a change, say 5 minutes ago, your developer can click on compare changes and see what all has changed. So on left and right, they would be able to see all of those changes. I'm not going into the depths of this right now because this is more towards the developers, but I would strongly recommend you to ask your developers to, start using this, because they can get code for CSS, Android, iOS, which is the Swift code. A lot of things will be sorted for them. Now let's start with module number 3, where we cover some practical examples. So as I said, I think I've already showed you the Figma file that we have created for Spotify. Just to quickly summarize, you need to make sure that if you have some subdivisions, let's just say that you have one more variation of mark not interested, what you can basically do is you can create a sub umbrella like this. So basically this becomes my umbrella term. And I can probably have a different color, probably like a darker color, because those colors help me understand that where is the branching happening, right? So you can have different pages within pages. You can split these. We've just made like a dotted line. And overall, I think you would have understood the point of this, right? So this is my onboarding section. Others are not in a section. I could have kept them in a section, but I've not kept them in a section. They're all like basic screenshots, and you can see that these are all JPEGs, but in reality for you, they all would be inside a frame. Now, if I were to show you the actual Figma workspace, this is how it would look. If I go to my design system, you'd have all of your design systems in place. Like, look how I have named them. This is system/desktop components system/Android components, iOS components, and universal. Then if I go to iOS WIP, then maybe I would be working on 3 different features, right? New user experience, playlist management, account management, like every single thing has a specific Figma file, and all of these have different designers. So notice how I can really see the name. This legibility is very important. And then maybe we are a work in progress for 3 features, and out of those 3 features, 2 are in GTM. So the GTM features are available right here. So it says new user/GTM. So all of these things, this is /WIP, all of these things, this organization will really help you scale faster. And then of course I've shown you how the file would look from the inside as well. Now Figma has a very valuable playlist. Just like office hours is for beginners, in the file with customers is for people who want to take their skills to the next level. Sadly, just like our playlist, even this golden playlist, this absolutely gem of a playlist, gets very little attention. But if you really want to see practical examples, real concrete examples, this is industry level content. If you really want to get into the depths of it, every single video here can give you weeks worth of insights. Like you will save weeks of hard work, weeks of confusion. And of course there are 58 videos, so easily it will take you 4 to 5 months to watch all of these. You can always shortlist. They have some videos in a different language as well, so you can skip those. I think they have some in French, because even this thumbnail was in French, so that's what I'm assuming. But I would strongly recommend you to watch these videos because they will really open up your brain. Like you can see from 2 years ago, I would have seen these videos back to back. Some of these videos I've seen them again and again. So I used to watch all of these videos a year back, 2 years ago, and they have really helped me as a designer. Now, if you've come here for the first time, folks, there are some foundational videos that you have to watch before you become a professional UX designer, because you have to clear out your vision, right? So we have a video called Step-by-Step Roadmap on how to become a UX designer, where I tell you about the degrees, what age you can do this on, average salaries, how to approach for an internship versus a job, all resources, all roadmaps in one single place. Then if you're trying to write a case study and if you feel that you're not getting good leads, it's probably because you don't have a good enough case study. We have created a 2-part playlist on how to write the ultimate UX case study. Please make sure that you watch both of these videos. In fact, this is now probably like 2024 because the lessons that I've taught here are literally universal. You will get to know about a lot of common mistakes that students make back to back, along with checklists and guidelines that you can follow while you are writing your case study. Now, we also have a lot of detailed courses on our YouTube channel, along with Learn UI UX, where you can learn UX design for free. There's howtoprompt.in. We have a 15-episode course where you can learn about UX design from scratch. And all of these resources are going to be in description. And trust me, it takes 6 to 8 months, but after 6 to 8 months, you can essentially change your life. You can change the trajectory of your entire life, just how I changed my life, just how all of my colleagues have changed their lives. Now, before we end this video, I can't leave without giving you homework. And by the way, if you follow the steps of the giveaway and do the homework, you will get bonus points. Okay, you will get bonus points. You can win the Figma pin delivered to your doorsteps. What you need to do is you need to pick any app that you use, any app, WhatsApp, Instagram, anything. And you need to create a fictional handoff file. Just how I created a Spotify's fictional handoff file, you need to do that for your own app as well. So you don't need to design anything. This is not a design practice. This is going to be a handoff practice. Assume that you're working in that big company and you need to create a handoff file for the designer. How would you structure the files? How would you create the pages? How would you name those flows? How would you structure those screenshots? Please make sure you create your headers, you create your comment cards. Please finish the previous episodes. If you haven't seen any of the previous 6 lectures, please make sure you finish that, because all of that syllabus is very important. And please make detailed notes on Notion, on Google Keep, wherever you want to make it. And please tag me on LinkedIn, tag me and Figma. I always love to see whatever you guys are doing. And our next lecture is going to be on prototyping. It's going to be a super in-depth lecture on the basics of prototyping, not advanced. But I will not even record the next lecture unless we get 500 distinct comments, genuine feedback, and 1000 likes within 5 days of upload. With that being said, I hope that you're taking care of your mind and body. This is your dost Ansh Mehra signing out. If you haven't seen any of the previous lectures, then you can find all our Figma videos in this playlist right here. I'll see you in the next lecture.